But yeah, when you got to the end, it was like, bodies and staircases, hidden tunnels. They doing laboratory research. Like it was when the book took off, like it took off, like it went and it did not stop. Hey everyone, and thank you for joining us once again. My name is Chris Colston. I'm here with Isaiah Tukes, Kimberly Lake, and Laria Reed, and we are Four Friends in a Book. So Four Friends in a Book is our monthly podcast series where we have a discussion centered around a book that we're reading together, and we also talk about any current or relevant topics that may or may not relate to that book. So somewhat of a book review mixed with just table talk amongst friends. So for our Four Friends crew that's already with us, we thank you guys. We appreciate your support. Please continue to share with your friends and family if you're enjoying the podcast. And for those that are new to our channel, please like, share, subscribe, follow us on all social media platforms. We would love to hear from you guys on any book recommendations you may have. Any topics you want us to discuss here on Four Friends in a Book podcast. So again, thank you for tuning in with us. So let's jump right into it. So the book for this month is within that suspense thriller category, When No One Is Watching by Alyssa Cole. Set in kind of present time or present day setting within Brooklyn, New York. The main character, Sydney, is moving back home. She's going back. She's recently gone through a divorce, so she's moving back into her brownstone with her mother, and she's really just noticing how the neighborhood is changing, how it's evolving. It's not the same place she knew when she grew up. It's going through this whole process of gentrification. New neighbors are moving in. Old neighbors that have historically been there are moving out, and so the book takes you on this journey of that overall process of gentrification, and then it take you beyond that as well. Like I said, it's in that suspense, that thriller, that mystery category. And so with that being said, what were you guys' overall takeaway? Well, not takeaway. What were your thoughts about the novel When No One Is Watching by Alyssa Cole? Did you guys find it to be an easy read? I know this may not have been your favorite genre of books, but was it an easy read for you? Did it just flow naturally? Did you enjoy it? Just what were your thoughts overall about the book? And we're gonna start with Miss Lake over here.
Okay, for me, I thought the novel was just okay. I love suspense and thriller, but the book for me did start off a bit slow. And then at the end, it was just like so much happened in such a short period of time. And the stuff that was happening was like so crazy. So that the ending kind of took me out of the book a bit as well. So for me, I didn't think it was like the most horrible book in the world, but for me, I would put it, in just okay.
Okay. Isaiah, what were your thoughts about the book When No One Is Watching?
My thoughts are, I don't think it was actually just a bad book. It just was a difficult read, as Kim said, for me. To be honest, the book started out really slow. It was hard to transition from chapter to chapter because I actually kept losing focus on what was actually going on with the book. I was expecting this book to be a thriller because it was advertised as a thriller, but it was more of a romance novel and a long way from a thriller. The relationship between Theo and Sydney was predictable, and their relationship became like the book of the story rather than this being a thriller. And, as Kim said, like it was like a really difficult read. And then once you actually got towards the end of the book, it just took you on like really, really high roller coaster and then just dropped you off on a cliff. And I don't know actually how I got to that cliff. So that's what I was saying. It was just basically difficult. Like what happened from the beginning that got me to this cliff and it just mellowed out. So it was a very difficult read for me to understand what was going on.
All right, Laria, what was your thoughts, your take on this book?
Okay, so I normally don't read thrillers, suspense books. I'm all about biographies, memoirs, like history, facts. Um, I'm all along those lines. So for me, I was kind of like, okay, it's gonna be new, it's gonna be cool. It was a lot of information. You really had to pay attention if you're reading it or listening to it on Audible of what was happening. But what it reminded me of was Tyler Perry's movies. You know how, or his sitcom, what's the Tyler Perry movie that sitcom that comes on BET? I forgot. But anyway, it always has like at the end like 20 million things happen, and you're like, what? So like the last two chapters or whatever, it was just like boom, 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 boom. But we hadn't, and it was so slow starting. So I agree with them. It was not a bad book. I think that everyone should read it. Alyssa Cole is Tyler Perry's first cousin in my mind, the way she writes.
Okay.
And it was kind of telenovela, sitcom-ish Tyler Perry. So if you like that kind of stuff, you'll really enjoy this book. I'm more of a gonna tell me what I need to know, build me up really quickly and get me to the point. She didn't do that. She was kind of slow with it. So, but the knowledge that she dropped about gentrification, I really enjoyed. So it was cool. It was cool. It was different, but it was cool. Different isn't always bad.
All right, so it appears that the consensus was the book was a little different. It was maybe non-traditional or a little, I guess, outside of what was expected. So I listened on Audible.
You looking up like,
yeah, I'm trying to find a word. So to me, it wasn't a bad book. I listened on Audible, so I didn't actually read it. So I was kind of hearing the words, and the one thing I did appreciate was I think it was narrated very well. So I actually like the people that narrated the book. I've listened to some, and the person was just very monotone. They didn't really speak well. So whoever was reading or narrating the book, the two characters for this Audible episode did a pretty good job. The book had a history to it, and so I love history, so I was kind of pulled in by that. It talks about the neighborhood that she grew up in, Gifford's Place, and just kind of gives the history. Sydney's on this journey to try to do a neighborhood tour and give all this back information, and it kept building up and like I said, it took off in leaps and bounds, and yeah, it was a little confusing at times. Like Isaiah mentioned, some of the stuff was predictable. He mentioned, like I said, she had just gone through a divorce. Then she, gets with Theo and all his little stuff going on, and then it take off and go left. But yeah, I don't particularly like thrillers, so it was new for me. So like I said, I don't really have a good comparison to relate it to, but I did enjoy the book. Like I said, it had a lot of good points, had a lot of relevant topics, even for what we see today, with the whole process of gentrification, especially in New York, with the brownstones and how the prices have skyrocketed in those areas. But yeah, it was a lot. I won't necessarily call it slow, but it kind of crept there, and then it flew off the pages, the book, or whatever you want to call it. So yeah. All right. So even with we talk about these characters. So Sydney again is a main character within the book, and then it transitions to my boy Theo.
Wow.
So Theo, white guy, he has an apartment, I think, in the same neighborhood with his girlfriend. And him and his girlfriend, they hit a rough patch. They going through it, and they basically on their last leg as far as their relationship. And then it becomes kind of an interest between Sydney and Theo, and the book kind of goes back and forth as far as those two different perspectives. So even on this journey, like I said, we've all mentioned that it kind of it just takes off and skyrockets. But I guess what character or what perspective from the book that you guys kind of, I guess, find more interesting or were more drawn into as you read the book or listened on Audible? Like, what were your thoughts about that? Isaiah, you want to start?
Okay. Yes. This is the first book that I read that I really did not have a favorite character. From reading this book, they was both all on the same playing field. With Sydney, she was, kind of the harsh, brash, and angry and difficult, basically to get along with. Theo was basically a doormat and did everything that Sydney told him to actually do. The ending, like I stated, went downhill, from nowhere. It took us like on an actual roller coaster. I really did. It wasn't a good synopsis for me to understand how I actually got to that climax. It was just basically like you started out slow. It was a very speed hill going down a roller coaster, and I don't know how I actually got to the end of this roller coaster. But like you say, it wasn't. It wasn't a bad book. It was just basically difficult for me to keep up because between the transition of the chapters and the going through the main characters, they never picked up where they actually left off. That like, they just changed to a totally different subject, and a lot of stuff basically didn't reiterate a lot of the things that they was talking about, which was some very important facts. So that's what was difficult for me to keep up and just keep going through what was going on within the book.
Okay. So Laria, coming to you. So which perspective or which character did you find most interesting or where that's kind of drawn to or intrigued by as you were listening to this book when no one is watching by Alyssa Cole?
Well, it was actually three different things. Well, I enjoyed, like I just said, I enjoy history. So when they were talking about the different things that happened in the neighborhood, I was kind of intrigued by that with Sydney. And then with Theo, his character, I was intrigued by his past. He always talked about where he came from, and his mom and his family. It was very, how should I say, eye-opening to understand who he was, to understand where he came from so that you could know why he said what he was saying. And I like that part. The part that I really wanted to know was about the boy that got arrested, that they found the drugs in the apartment. I wanted to know more about that part. I'm like, so what happened? With that, I wanted to know more about it. With gentrification and finding out, it kind of sparked things in my mind. Like, is this really happening where people are being forced out of their homes by different companies doing things to get people out of their homes? So it really I never thought about it that way. I know people have gone through great lengths to get people out of their areas of place when they wanted to move in. But I never thought about it in the sense of planning stuff, planning drugs, or going to those extents to do things. So that was kind of the things that I looked forward to listening to through Audible when I was reading the book. So yeah, it was cool. It was a lot of great nuggets that they dropped. But like I said, that Tyler Perry ending, we were building. It was like going up a slow roller coaster, like that track. But it was like that for days, not for hours, but days. And then it was like, whoa.
Yeah, your hair blown back.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. All right, Kim. So Theo, Sydney, or any other character within the book, who did you find most intriguing, interesting, drawn to as you were reading or listening to this book?
So the book was told from it flipped between Theo's perspective and Sydney's perspective throughout the whole book. I'm kind of with like Isaiah, like the two main characters, I just wasn't really feeling. Like I didn't buy into them. I didn't like them really that much. Like Sydney was getting on my nerves, and I was like, no wonder her best friend Drea be ignoring her all the time. And Theo, like he was just kind of bland to me. So I like the old neighbor. I forgot his name, but he was like the most likable character to me from the book. And so when he disappeared, was one of the residents that disappeared. I wanted to know what happened to him. So
Right.
he was my number one in the book. But Sydney and Theo, I could leave them. I didn't have to take them.
For me, I think Theo had a very interesting story. So I was kind of intrigued by his journey. So again, white guy with his girlfriend, white girlfriend. They've moved into this neighborhood that has been historically black, but still kind of transitioning and changing. And so, of course, it's getting to a point where it's more costly and expensive to live there. And so you get the impression that, him and his girlfriend are very well off. And then Theo just kind of hits you with this jab, and it's like, he really been putting on a show for everybody. I don't even think his girlfriend knows. Like, he got a criminal background past. Like, he been on some scammer, hustling type stuff. And it was just, I was somewhat in awe, but also, like, I can see this being realistic because, like, he literally forged his background. I mean, he didn't even finish. I don't think he finished high school. He, forged his resume, and was able to get a prestigious job, and really was able to make it just based off of, kind of how he carried himself and some of that privilege that he had. And I was just really amazed. And he ended up losing his job, but it wasn't because they found out that, he didn't have the education. Like, he was doing some other behind the back scheming type stuff. So, like, he was really scamming the whole way. But as you read it, that kind of came out. I was like, man, I can believe this. It was very believable that people can really get away with this kind of stuff. And yeah, I was in awe that, like, that was his life and that was what was being portrayed. And like I said, I don't even think the people around him were aware of his criminal past and the things that he's been able to get away with. So that was that his perspective throughout the book as he kind of unfolded and peeled back was kind of intriguing for me to follow along with that journey.
Yeah. And it was crazy too. I was gonna say too, Chris, I was intrigued by how he got his job. And in the interview, he said that he looked on the wall and saw where the guy went to school and talked about that. And wherever school he went to, the supervisor never was really even interviewed. Nobody checked his references or anything. And he was just hired. And I'm like, I just find that hard to believe as an African American that I can go into a job and that happen and nothing get checked for a job making that kind of money, because he said he was making really good money. So yeah, that was what intrigued me too. I forgot about that part. But yes, Chris, thank you for that.
Yeah. Okay, so we've kind of all talked about it, how the book kind of started off slow. Laria mentioned this roller coaster. We kind of just went on this journey slowly up, and then it was just like boom, like hair blown back moment. So what was that moment for you guys in the book? Like, what part of the book provided the most suspense or like most surprise that you couldn't believe, you weren't really expecting? Like, what was that moment for you? And we're gonna come to you, Laria. What was that moment, that hair blown back moment for you as you read or listened to this book?
I think it was look, the whole ending. It was just like, what? Huh? Okay, she dead, he dead, everybody dead. And, what? We found a tunnel. What? It was too much. So I guess when my interest got piqued when the older gentleman wasn't found, like they were looking for him. But then when her best friend, can we say what happened? Are we doing spoilers?
Just go and give it to him. You would have to read with us.
And I was like, oh, dang, okay. And I think that was kind of the start of it. And then after that, it just kept going. And I was like, it started becoming very unbelievable. And I was like, okay. For me. because I'm looking for suspense that's more realistic. And like I said, if you're a Tyler Perry fan, this is the book for you. You will love if you love that kind of writing. I like things a little more realistic, but it just kept going. So that was the start of it for me, was when her best friend was killed. So yeah. And then the mama, where the mama was. That's another thing. But okay.
Yeah.
I was like, it was just too much.
So I think for me, when she started kind of, I don't want to say freaking out or tripping out. I don't know what it was. Like she was, she got in a Uber and she thought the guy was about to kidnap her. Like that's when the story kind of took a turn. And at one point, I was really wondering, like, is Sydney really just making this stuff up in her head? Like,
Right.
So it was a lot of suspense in that area. Like you didn't know what was going on. Like I didn't know if she was like daydreaming. She was having issue with her mother, her health. Like I didn't know what was going on with that. And but yeah, when you got to the end, it was like, bodies and staircases, hidden tunnels. They doing laboratory research. Like it was, when the book took off, like it literally it took off. Like it went and it did not stop. So but yeah, I think the start of it was really with Sydney and just really wondering like what's really going on with her mentally, because I was thinking like, man, she dreaming all this stuff. This ain't really happening for real. So yeah. Kim, what was that point for you in the book where you was just like suspense, highlight, or just really unbelievable moment, turning point for you?
I agree with you both. I just think it was the whole ending together. It was just like so much happened in such a short amount of time, and the stuff that was happening was it wasn't just like little things. It was like such an unbelievable stretch, from like the murder rampage to like riots to finding dead bodies to being caught and drugged and like it being rescued in the end, all of that. Maria said it reminds her of like Tyler Perry. For me, it reminds me of like Shonda Rhimes shows like Scandal and like Grey's Anatomy, how they start off, one way and then they just get like unbelievable. And for me, as a reader, that's hard for me. Like when a book kind of is so unrealistic, it takes me out of the book, unfortunately. So that started me like, okay, whatever. So it was just everything that happened at the end was like crazy. But like Laria, I will say finding out what happened to her best friend, I think that for me was the most, I guess, enlightening part of the suspense, just wondering what happened to her. Right. But just the ending as a whole, it was a lot.
What?
Yeah. Isaiah, so what was that moment for you, or that kind of zenith point of like suspense, or just where you just really was in awe about what was going on?
The moment for me was not even towards the end. It was like actually in the middle for me, when she said that she actually buried her mom in the backyard. So I was, thinking like, well, you just said your mom was rich, so why did you bury her in the backyard instead of having a proper funeral? And then that's when her and Theo went to the backyard and no body was in there. So I thought they was going to hamper on that, like, where's this body? What was going on? And it just left me, it's just like a clothing on a piece of hanger. You just left me there. Like you didn't really tell me really what happened. And I think that was the moment I thought you was gonna talk about that or reiterate what happened with that situation, and you said nothing. So that was the moment I thought it was just gonna take off, and it just went slow again. Like you said, a lot of this stuff I thought Sydney was making in her mind because she was paranoid a lot and thinking that Theo or her friend was out to get her and everybody was coming to her at once. So that was the moment for me in the middle. The end was just it wasn't even believable as for like a thriller for me. So that's why the highlight for me was in the middle, when she actually said that she actually buried her mom in the backyard. And I thought that, okay, this still about to really take off. And then when it did, and I just flatlined again.
Oh, and to Isaiah's point earlier, though, Alyssa Cole is a romance writer. Like she has a bunch of romance books, so it's funny that you picked up on that. I think this was her first thriller or outside her regular genre. So,
yeah, I could tell she was romance.
Yeah, like it was a lot of that
Yeah,
Sidney Theo sex scene was yeah. So all right, that's funny. That's funny. So let's transition a little bit. So we read this book When No One Is Watching by Alyssa Cole, and one of the primary emphasis or topics that was really heavily pushed throughout this book was this whole concept of gentrification. So I think we're all kind of familiar with what gentrification is. It's essentially the process where you go into impoverished or kind of poor neighborhoods, and then there's this influx of money that's poured into them to kind of redevelop them. You have areas where they have been historically, maybe have been a Black or minority owned or operated area. And then you have this influx of middle class and wealthy people moving in to these traditionally urban areas and kind of taking them over. What are you guys' thoughts on this whole concept of gentrification? Like when you hear that, like what comes to mind for you? Like what do you immediately think about when you hear the word gentrification? Or even if you have any experience or exposure to it, like what are your thoughts or feelings behind that whole process? We're gonna start with Isaiah again.
Okay. Well, many people view gentrification as a good thing, and after all, they're bringing beauty to low income neighborhoods and businesses, in poor neighborhoods, and how could that be a bad thing in somebody's eyes that really doesn't understand gentrification? Except that the new arrivals drive many people out of the neighborhoods, homes that they have actually bought, that they actually have built, from the ground up. And these are these people's childhood homes. And, even some of these areas, like when they actually build up these apartments and these condos and they're charging $4K a month to rent these actual apartments, no one can actually afford those who actually live in these neighborhoods. So of course they bring in different people with, more resources to actually, move into these neighborhoods. And unfortunately, the people that actually grew and took a love for this neighborhood are actually pushed out. And some history behind that is that this has actually been going on for years, where they actually will zone people out and they will put people in a particular area and they will pay them to actually stay in this area. Like, I want you to stay in this area. You can't move here in the suburbs where I live at, but I'm going to pay you to stay over here. And once you move, the payment actually stops. And I think that it is wrong on so many ends, that so many people are like relinquished to poverty because they want that subsidized payment just to stay in this particular area, not to move out to the suburbs where it may be more nice. And for me, I couldn't see myself building in gentrification. I think all money isn't good money. And for me, I actually like to sleep at night.
Yeah. Maria, what are your thoughts on this whole application process, or when you hear that word, like what does that mean to you? And also, even to take a little bit further, do you see any, I guess, benefits, pros or cons to that whole concept?
Well, for me, when I hear gentrification, I automatically think of greed, because that's really what it boils down to. I mean, you got people in a neighborhood who can't even afford to live in the same neighborhood they've been living in for years. They did that every time in Atlanta when they build a new stadium or something like that. There's even an older lady, my mom always talks about this with the Falcons, when they first built that dome, the very first one, they came in there and just, it was ridiculous. And she told them they would never win anything because they put so many people out. And look at the Falcons today. They said that lady
Curse.
They said that lady cursed them, and but they have been able to win a Super Bowl. I'm just saying, and that was back in the '90s. So hey, but I just feel like it's greed. I feel like it's so. It's just not right. I understand if you want to come in and revitalize the community and do it for the right reasons and bring things up, great. But do it where the people that live in the community can actually come up as well. And it can be a win-win situation for everybody if it's done the proper way. But these companies that come in, they say, "Where's that? Okay, this land is cheaper over here. We can come in here and buy all these people out. They're ready to sell. If we come in and ask them, tell them we'll give them a certain amount of money." And just think about it. You've been owning your house, and somebody comes in and says, "Hey, I'll give you $150,000, and you owe $20,000 on your house," and you're like, "Okay, fine, I'm out." But I mean, how can you turn it down? So you're going to leave, and I just believe that it's wrong. And like Isaiah says, you want to be able to sleep at night, and you can't. Y'all know I'm saying. You cannot be blessed doing people like that. You will not be blessed doing that. So that's my thing about that. Yeah.
That's the word.
That's what the word of God says. Although they don't know, but
Preach it, sister. Preach it. So Kim, gentrification, what does that mean to you? Do you see any pros and or cons to the whole concept of gentrification?
When I hear gentrification, the first thing I think about in the neighborhood is a Whole Foods grocery store. Like, if a Whole Foods pops up in one of these neighborhoods, I'm like, okay, y'all have been gentrified. So that's the first thing I always think about.
That's true.
I think that it's unfortunate for the residents that have lived there, like in real life and like in this book for maybe 30 years, or you grew up in a neighborhood and all of a sudden, one, you don't recognize it, and two, the people that live there are leaving, and three, you kind of have to decide what you're going to do. And like Maria said, I mean, if you're in a lower income area, if somebody comes up to you and is like, "Hey, here's a check for $150 or $175," that's a lot of money for anybody to turn down. And unfortunately, I feel like it's in those instances where they're taking advantage of those residents, because that property for $175 turned around to be worth $800,000. The people that do live there and are renting and don't own, they just get priced out of their apartments and have to leave. So for me, I think it's unfortunate. There's a difference between, like Maria said again, gentrification and revitalizing an area. I think people should invest in these areas. I mean, the residents that live there now, who says they don't want to shop at a Whole Foods or don't want these nice restaurants or places to be? Just because they're in a lower income area doesn't mean that they don't want those same amenities themselves. So I think that we should look into revitalization and what that means to help people in the whole community come up together.
That's true.
Yeah, that's good.
That's true.
Yeah, and I don't know. For me, it's we've read these other kind of historical books, and I'm a history guy. Even with the last book we covered, where historically you had people that were limited to only certain neighborhoods or certain areas within a town or a city, and again, they were considered urban areas. You had a huge influx of people that left the inner city to move to the suburbs. And now you're seeing the reverse trend of that, where people are moving back into the inner city, and these areas are now becoming, the it place to be, and all the development is happening around it. But it is a lot of greed and just there's so much money involved in this process that it really makes you question the true motivations and the intentions, of this. One thing even within this book, and Maria, I think you kind of mentioned it, like you get to a point where it's like this stuff seems unrealistic, but it's disheartening to think about it, but to know that greed and money motivates so much that I think Alyssa does do a good job of kind of highlighting this, that, these may not be just wild fabrications of our imaginations. Like people may be going through these great lengths of literally, planning and plotting and starting riots and, taking these whole initiatives and, kidnapping people and like doing these things just to get these people out of these neighborhoods because they know how much more money they can make, how they can turn and flip these properties, and make a quick dollar.
Right.
And so you guys bring up a good point, the whole concept of gentrification versus like reinvestment and revitalization of an area to, try to develop it and bring it up for everyone to participate in it. I think that's one thing, but when you are literally taking over areas and pricing people out that may have had a long history, you see a lot of that in, California and Oakland, some of those historic areas where they were really limited to a certain group of people, but now, like I said, the money's coming in, they're able to buy the property up cheap and invest and throw these dollars at it, and you literally price the people out where they can't afford the taxes.
Right.
They can't afford to stay there. And the crazy thing is, like, this is not just an American problem. Like, this is an international problem and issue as well. Like, I visited South Africa a few years back, and they're seeing the same thing in those areas where you literally are just, people are coming in, they want to build condos and tear down these houses that were historically just kind of for a certain group of people. But like I said, development coming in, buying them cheap, building condos, and now it's a tourist attraction. And it's a sad thing, especially when you leave out the people that have the history and know the history of these areas. So yeah, I agree with all you guys. All right, so look, for Friends of the Book podcast, we giving y'all books, current topics, relevant events that may be going on in our community, within our country, within this nation, across the world. And so, again, we just wrapped up When No One Is Watching by Alyssa Cole and the topic of gentrification and what that means to us. So, good discussion, guys. I appreciate y'all input. I appreciate it.
Good job, Chris. Appreciate you too.
All right, so look, if y'all been watching us for a while, y'all already know what time it is. Our favorite segment of the show. We have it every episode, which we call The Rant. 60 seconds, uninterrupted. We're not debating. We're not contesting. We're not arguing. We're just giving talk, discussion from the heart. So we're coming back to my brother, the rant man himself, Mr. Isaiah Toots, killing these rants every episode. He's been educating us. He's been giving us new information. He's been enlightening us. And like I told y'all before, we never know what we're getting. But again, we're not debating it. We're not contesting it. So my brother, go on, do your thing. Starting now. Go.
The world watched hundreds of Haitians who traveled to the U.S. border to be turned away by aggression from the Border Patrol. And Haiti is only being punished because they were the first African American country to actually be free in this world hemisphere. And I think that the U.S. policy towards Haiti has always been corrupt, and it doesn't have to be that way, because we know that the U.S. can do it. There's a way to do it, and there's just no will to do it. And after being denied their legal right to make an asylum claim, hundreds of Haitians were deported back to where they found their unlabeled belongings scattered on the ground. And Black asylum seekers have a right to be here. These people could have been provided with food, shelter, money, and medical aid. And I spoke previously that the United States has promised to bring 95,000 Afghans here. And I'm not saying they shouldn't be brought here. They should. That is the promise of the country. But if you can bring 95,000 Afghans here, why are you sending a small amount of Haitians back on an airplane to a country stricken in poverty? And that's that on that.
Thank you, brother. So once again, man, just educating us and enlightening us. Like I said, we should all be informed about what's going on, not with what's only within our country and in our neighborhoods, you know, but across this world that we live in. And we share this space with other people of different backgrounds, different races, different religions, and we should all be about, you know, equity and equality. And so we have to be informed, and again, we have to be the catalyst for change that we want to see, whether it's locally or on a national or worldwide platform. So thank you again, brother, for educating us and schooling us once again with your rant.
Yes.
All right, so look, Four Friends in the Book podcast. We about to conclude this, but we got to tell y'all about the book that we got coming up next. So Isaiah, go on and tell them about what we're reading for next month.
Hey guys, before we let you go, as Chris stated, we wanted to actually tell you about the book that we're actually about to get into. I want to introduce our next book, which is Finna by Nate Marshall. Backstory on Nate Marshall: he's an award-winning artist, he's a professor, and he's from the south side of Chicago. And Finna is actually a sophomore book, which is a book of poetry, and you actually don't want to miss it. Laria, when can they tune in?
You guys can tune in to watch Four Friends in a Book every third Thursday of the month. So put it in your phone, mark your calendar, do what you got to do to watch us every third Thursday at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time.
And make sure to like us on Facebook and follow us on Instagram, Four Friends in a Book. And if you aren't subscribed to our YouTube channel, we're trying to get 1,000 subscribers. Make sure to subscribe to our channel and send a link to your friends and have them join the Four Friends in a Book family.
All right, guys, as always, thank you for tuning in with us. Let's read, let's learn, let's grow, and let's have a discussion here on Four Friends in a Book. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.